Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of Tuesday the 13th of December. Any apologies for absence, John? Thank you. Record of decisions of prior meeting. The record agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Declarations of interest of any description, colleagues. Anyone? Councillor Galvin.
Yes, thank you, Leader. In item 7, the capital strategy, there's quite a significant section on the Medway Development Company, which I welcome to see in that report. But I'm a director of the Medway Development Company, though I do have a dispensation from the Council Conduct Committee to speak and vote on issues concerning MDC.
Thank you. Councillor Doe.
And I have the same interest to declare, except of course I'm chair as well.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Nope. We'll move on then to agenda item 4, which is the safety valve report. Councillor Isles, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I am pleased to present this report, which outlines the plans to be submitted to the Department for Education to recover the Council's budget deficit on the high needs block. These plans will be submitted to the DfE with a request for 17.7 million investment as part of the safety valve intervention programme to support the delivery of these plans. The local authority's dedicated schools grant allocation is calculated in 4 separate funding blocks. The local authority's dedicated schools grant allocation is calculated in 4 separate funding blocks: schools, early years, high needs and the central service schools block, using national funding formulas. The high needs block is the funding mechanism through which the local authority provides provision to meet the statutory duties set out above, over and above that funded through the schools. The high needs block budget in 21-22 was 45.5 million. This budget remains under significant financial pressure and, at the end of the financial year 21-22, had a cumulative deficit of 20.8 million. Medway's high need block deficit recovery plan focuses on 5 areas within the report: appropriately manage the demand for education, health and care plans, EHCPs, ensuring EHCP requests are timely and appropriate and supported by education and health professionals, increase the proportion of children and young people with SEND who receive high quality education and achieve their potential in mainstream schools, ensure the use of appropriate and cost-effective provision, sufficiency of provision, and sustainability of governance, management and delivery. Each area has supporting activities to deliver the required improvements. Also, as part of the safety valve process, Medway Council can also apply for additional capital funding to help deliver the plan. The Council has duly submitted a capital bid. This plan is presented to Cabinet ahead of a final decision from the Secretary of State expected by the end of December. I move to the recommendations on page 27. At 10.1, the Cabinet is asked to note the comments made by the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny as set out in section 6 of the report. And 10.2, the Cabinet is asked to approve the Medway Safety Valve Intervention Plan, which has been submitted to the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, first of all, I thank officers for all their considerable hard work and tenacity in terms of getting us to this stage. This is not a magic bullet by any means. The reason why we have a deficit with the high needs block is because of the high level of challenge there is in providing these high needs places in a sustainable way. There are several streams to this programme. One is what we're doing in terms of trying to provide the necessary places locally. Part of the plan is also resource provision, so we're providing those specialist places on mainstream sites. And the key aspect to this all is the partnership working with the schools and a culture of inclusivity, so that those high needs places are there for those pupils who should be in that provision. And actually, where possible, we are making the most of resource provision or just supporting children through quality first practice in our mainstream schools. So there are several streams to this, but ultimately I think the most important one is the inclusive culture and the partnership working that sits within. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I think Medway can be rightfully proud of our SEND provision. It's really first class. Some of us have, just a few weeks ago, had the privilege of going to the opening of the extension to Bradfield School and able to see the excellent facilities provided there and the brilliant work done by the teachers. A little bit further back, I was closely involved with the new build at Abbey Court through the capital projects team, which used an innovative laminated wood construction, which I think this very cold weather will prove valuable for the school because the insulating quality of that material is brilliant. We've got fantastic facilities. We've got some fantastic teachers. The trouble is the government has not given us the funding to carry that, proper funding to carry that work on, and that's just why we find ourselves in this situation. I think it's a great shame because every child in Medway, indeed every child in the country, deserves to have that best start in life, no matter what point they start from. And some of these children start from a very, very challenging position, and it's right that they're given every hope, for future progress. It really is a shame that the government haven't stepped up to the plate with this and funded this provision properly and left us in an awful budget position. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Anyone else? Back to you, Councillor Isles, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank members for their comments. Councillor Potter summed it up eloquently, and all I can say in addition to what he's already said is that there will be robust governance around the execution of the plan and the activities within the plan. And just to say that we are dedicated to providing our children with SEND the earliest intervention and the appropriate provision at the right time and in the right place. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5, Councillor Brake, and there is a supplementary agenda item number 1 relating to the deliberations of overview and scrutiny. Councillor Brake.
Thank you very much, Leader. And as you've pointed out, the addendum to the report as presented now includes an amendment, or addendum I should say, that covers section 1, paragraphs 1.1 to 1.9. But basically, the Health and Social Care Act 2022 requires integrated care partnerships. That is to say, the joint committee consists of Medway Council, Kent County Council, and the Kent and Medway NHS Integrated Care Board to prepare a strategy setting out how the assessed need in relation to its area are to be met, with an interim strategy to be published by December 2022. The strategy also needs to be approved by all 3 partners, Medway Council, KCC and the NHS Integrated Care Board. It was approved by the KCC Cabinet on the 1st of December and will be taken to the Integrated Care Board later this week. The report was considered by the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and its comments are set out in the addendum report. The Cabinet is asked to note the comments from the Health and Adult Social Care Overview of Scrutiny Committee, again as set out in the addendum report. Secondly, the Council is asked to approve the Kent and Medway Interim Integrated Care Strategy as set out in Appendix 1 and to delegate authority to the Director of Public Health in consultation with the portfolio holder for adult services to make any changes required following consideration of the strategy by other committees and partners. I'm happy to take any questions, Leader. Thank you.
Well, if I can comment on this, I think that the intention of this actually at long last recognises something which it seems to me that many branches of the care facilities that exist, they just don't seem to realise that as a member of the public who needs service, who's probably ill at the time, or maybe disabled and so on, they actually don't care where the service comes from. What they want is the service. And so if we end up with three organisations who each do their thing and each try to serve the public as best they can, but there is no integration, then what will then happen inevitably is you get duplication and waste. And I think what the government has seen that, and I think that I think this is very good that we're going towards a strategy. My only comment about that is that that strategy has not to be based upon goodwill between the people making the strategy, although that's important. It's got to be right at the parish pump, and the message has got to come down from the Olympian heights, as it were, right down to the people who are dealing face to face with those that need those services. And all the time that organisations are, how can I put it, they're more loyal to the organisation than they are to the patient, then that is, or to the person requiring the service, then it will fail. Now, I'm not making that comment in respect of Medway, but I am saying you've seen spectacular failures over various parts of the country where these services don't link up. And I think it's that that's inspired this idea. So I think that, I know that Councillor Brake goes into this with a spirit of considerable goodwill, as do the officers. But I only hope that our partners will have similar goodwill in the health service particularly, because I think this is a terribly important initiative. It could change the way in which people have confidence in the system. Because at the moment, if you're pushed from pillar to post, you know, how much time is wasted saying, I'm afraid we don't deal with this. It's the people down the road that deal with it. And that is what really inflames the public, gives them the idea that that isn't a good service. And this is what this integrated care strategy seeks to avoid. Waste and lack of responsibility almost for the person. Someone has to take responsibility for driving that course of action for that particular patient or customer. And I think this is what this strives to do. So I think it's a very, very worthy effort. And I think I know that Councillor Brake will take this forward, but I just want to make it very clear that the public has high expectations of a different way of dealing with the cases, because this is something when we haven't got enough resources to serve every need often. This is a way in which we can actually maximise the use of those resources and deploy them in the best way. So I very much welcome the start, at least, of the thinking on this.
Thank you, Councillor Doe. Councillor Howells, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I am very happy to see this integrated care strategy. I think it is long overdue. I think with the growing or ongoing growing demand and complications in needs, etc., I think this is what is necessary in order to attempt and achieve to deliver the service, effective service that people and from my perspective, of course, children need and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brake, back to you, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, colleagues, for your comments. And I certainly endorse all of you've said, and particularly patient first is certainly should be the watchword, and it really is down to us to make sure that's exactly what happens. As has been said, this strategy is long overdue. We've had a very complicated system, and I feel sure, and I'd like to feel very confident that we are in fact turning the corner with such a strategy, which will be of benefit to all of those people that certainly live in our communities. So thank you very much, Leader, and I turn my attention now, or our attention, to recommendations, paragraph 6. The Cabinet is asked to note the comments from the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee as set out in the addendum report. And the Cabinet is asked to approve the Kent and Medway Interim Integrated Care Strategy as set out at Appendix 1, and to delegate authority of the Director of Public Health in consultation with the portfolio holder for adult services to make any changes required following consideration of the strategy by other committees and partners. I so move. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Brake. Just a comment on 6.2, if I may. Where it says to make any changes required following consideration by others, I think it goes without saying that those changes will have to be in accordance with Medway's principles and best interests before
Absolutely.
they're agreed.
Yep,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you. Turn to agenda item 6, the Treasury Management Strategy, which two comments first of all. Before I do that, move the recommendations under section 11 on page 119, which are to note the comments of the Audit Committee and to consider this report and to note its contents. So we'll just say to note its contents. The Cabinet is requested to note its contents and note that the report will also be referred to full Council. First of all, just a couple of comments. First, I'd like to thank the Audit Committee for section 8 through to 8.2 and 8.21, considering the report and noting its contents, and thank the Audit Committee for going into it in some detail as is set out in those comments and questions. And that is the role of the Audit Committee, is to drill down into such reports, and they seem to have done that with alacrity, and I thank them very much for that. The other thing I'd like to just draw mention's attention to, which is really a matter of context and very useful indeed, is Appendix 1, which gives an economics update and a view of the economic conditions confronting the company. And there's an awful lot in there in what, 3 pages, 3 and a bit pages, and I think that adds useful context to the situation where we find ourselves. So I move those recommendations. Councillor Doe.
I'd like to second that and simply say that I think that Treasury management is hard enough when the market's moving slowly and you've got time to consider, because you've got 2 ends to it. You've got first of all the end that makes sure your money is invested wisely and well, but on the other hand, you've also got to make sure that when you need it to be available, it's available. And trying to match those 2 things when interest rates are changing all the time, and when in fact the investment picture is changing almost daily, as people cope with the recession or they don't cope with the recession and so on, you know, I think it takes an awful lot of care and know-how. And I think you'll see from this document, I think the amazing thing is that we have staff that are capable of actually doing all this in-house. And I think that's I do think that most people pay quite reasonable sums to have have these kind of services outsourced, and that may have the advantage of a bigger investment in some cases. But equally, what it doesn't ensure is that you're getting attention to your account all the time, and that's why I think our method is so successful. So, you know, I do congratulate Councillor Jarrett and also those involved, because I think that this is one of Medway's really strong features, the fact that Treasury management is conducted so well.
Is that agreed? Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Leader. And I'd just like to echo your comments of the Audit Committee. I sat on the Audit Committee for 2.5 years and was indeed the chairman latterly of that. And the Treasury Outrun report was, the Treasury report was always hotly debated and hotly dissected. I think it's good to read in there that we've reduced the short-term loan from 70 million down to 45 million. Confidence from the Section 151 officer that we're not going to exceed the CFR. So those are, and also we're within the limits of the benchmarking. So those are all key indicators, I think, in this report that say that we are managing our treasury very well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hackwell. Very true. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. I turn now to the capital strategy, which is set out from page 125, and I move the recommendations under 8.1, which asks us to agree the capital strategy. Just a couple of comments about it, if I may. Firstly, I think my short introduction on page 132 talks about recent movements and recent grants and what we're going to use that money for in terms of future High Street Fund and the Levelling Up Fund, two important slugs of money that will help us to make improvements in Chatham primarily as our city centre. So I think those comments are relevant. I draw members' attention to those. The only other comment I wish to make, apart from the fact of saying what an important document this is, because it sets out our path and our approach to things over 2023 and beyond, and I'd like to draw members' attention in that regard to a couple of things on page 133, which talks about long-term ambitions for Medway and looks at the size, the paragraph, the third paragraph, as at 31st of March 2022, Medway Council has assets of worth 762 million on its balance sheet, and the current capital programme investment worth more than 470 million. So even a casual observer will see that this is a big organisation dealing with large sums of money, all of which are being well directed to improve Medway. The fifth paragraph, which starts, it is right now that we begin again to look beyond the budgets immediately ahead and return to planning out to the medium term and beyond. And it goes on to talk about we will be publishing 5-year revenue projections alongside the capital revenue budget, and these will be considered in February 2022. And I think that is so important that we don't just create a strategy for 23-24, that we look at years ahead. And indeed, anyone that views the capital programme and the capital monitoring reports that see that there's expenditure spread over not just 1 year but a number of years ahead. It is a dynamic process. The capital programme is periodically revised and reviewed and updated and indeed added to on a frequent basis as capital grants come through, as members take investment priorities relating to the council's own funds, even though those are strictly limited, and always a focus on doing what is right for the people of Medway, and in terms of growing our economy and growing our employment market and such like. In terms of, just want to refer in that regard to investment priorities, starting on page 137, and that talks about the Housing Infrastructure Fund. It talks about housing. It talks about the important work that the Medway Development Company is pursuing on our behalf at Garrison Point and Chatham Waterfront here in the city centre, which are going to make such a big difference and a big change here in the city centre. Over 300 new apartments on those two sites alone, which is to say nothing of Mountbatten House, which is referred to, and indeed later on we will be turning our detailed attention to the old Debenham site which we've also acquired, and indeed other sites outside of Chatham itself. So there's an awful lot in this strategy. It is actually good read and easy to understand for people, and I think that's what a strategy needs to be. It needs to be user-friendly. So having said all of that, I commend it to colleagues and refer back to moving 8.1 for your consideration. Councillor Doe.
I'm very happy to second this, and you'll see that we are really embarked on, I think really outlines for anyone who even can glance through this, the sheer scale of the work that's being undertaken in various areas. And at the same time, obviously it is a period of risk. There's no game without risk. And what I think is so important, and is done in Medway, I think, pretty well, is the fact that risk management must dominate. You know, it's one, we need to know what risks we're facing, and that's why MDC also has a great regard to what the risks are and how we can minimise them or at least make them smaller than they are. And one way and another, we are succeeding in building an entirely new city centre, but it isn't only there. We've got development sites, for example, near to the airport, our Medway 1 and so on. And this, I think, is all due, really, to two things. The first is that we've a wise use of capital ourselves, and the second thing, I think, is the extraordinary ability for which I perhaps compliment Councillor Chambers and Councillor Jarrett on actually levering in money from the government for specific projects on the basis, and this is the important thing, that Medway is seen to deliver. You know, there are a lot of things are bid for. The bids are made well, and then actually the delivery suffers. And I think we've always said to ourselves, we don't want the money if we can't deliver it. And we are going to deliver it. And that really is, I think, a key part of that capital strategy. So I'm very happy to second this. And I think that, you know, it is something which really shows how careful we are when you see in other authorities and so on, how just lunging into things and buying, you know, the local shopping centre or whatever it may be, doesn't make sense because they've not done the sums as they should have done. I think we do those sums and sometimes walk away if we have to. But I think the point is that we are, even though we've got those risk management in place, moving at speed, tremendous speed. And I'm looking forward to seeing that city centre today finished and working for the good of Medway.
Thank you, Councillor Doe. Councillor Galvin, please.
Thank you, Leader. And to follow on from Councillor Doe, I think this report brings home the quantum of the work that this administration's been involved in. And Councillor Doe was quite right to say that we've been cautious. Yes, we have been cautious. Every step of the way we've risk assessed it. He mentions some of the incautious investments that have been made elsewhere, and intriguingly, had we not been cautious, we would have bought Debenhams 6 or 7 years ago for 10 times the price that we've now acquired it for. So I think that slow, cautious approach has been the right way. But having said that, there is a lot there that's already been achieved. You mentioned Garrison Point and the Rivers side developments, but we mustn't forget the 20 affordable homes that we built at White Road, which was the rented affordable for Garrison Point. They've actually now been lived in for nearly 2 years. The residents moved in just before Christmas 2 years ago. So talking of affordable accommodation, through the First Homes programme that we've been able to get funding for, a very large percentage of Garrison Point can be classed as affordable. So it's not just the standard 25% affordable that we insist from our 106 arrangements for planning, but considerably more affordable homes have been provided for people, and the vast majority of those people are Medway residents, which is I'm delighted to see. You also mentioned Mountbatten House. That's an interesting one for me because I, a little while ago, sat and watched the debate at planning for the planning permission, which is mentioned here for Mountbatten House, every single member of the Labour group on planning voted against that, every single one of them. We've never had such a clear distinction between an administration that wants to improve the life of our residents and get on and do things, and an opposition that can only see the negative side and obstruct. So, I thought that showed clearly who thinks of Medway, who wants to make Medway a better, more prosperous place to live in. That planning committee clearly showed that Labour are totally unfit to control this administration, and look forward after May to making sure that that doesn't happen. There's some very interesting things in this document as well, Leader. I was quite intrigued to look at the table 1 on page 135 and see the huge amount of value of assets that this authority has to look after. The majority of those assets are looked after by a very, very small team in the capital projects area who use the BRMF funding to look after those buildings. And I can't say loudly enough what a brilliant job that small team does in maintaining that huge amount of assets. And it was interesting to see on page 157, in the section maintaining our operational buildings, to see how fantastically efficient that team has been. So I think it's a fantastic report, Leader. It's a pity it's sort of hidden away as almost a financial document. I mean, we should be actually, I think, promoting a lot of this document widely, because it shows, how, providing you're cautious and do things well, how much can be achieved. And I think this is a fantastic record of Medway's progress, and I look forward to being involved in progressing even further. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Iles.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm very happy to see this strategy, particularly in reference to investing in our service delivery, particularly in children and young people, and actually delivering on and supporting our vision that people in Medway will have the best start in life. And we can see this as part of as the principle of our school place planning strategy, which is referenced here, and also for our SEND children in terms of the allocation of the money in that capital budget. So I'm really happy to see that there, and I fully support the report and the strategy. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? A couple of comments for me then, in responding to what very useful and helpful comments made by colleagues. Yes, this is a financial document, but as Councillor Galvin said, and as I referred to in my opening, this is very much a user-friendly document, and we'll use that to continue to promote what we're doing in Medway for the betterment of Medway people, including and especially, as Councillor Iles said, giving our youngsters the best start in life. And I think Councillor Galvin's comments about comparing the administration with the opposition are absolutely right, that we are giving people the best start in life, we are giving people the best life opportunities, and others are driven by narrow political aims that hopefully will be exposed in the run-up to next May. I think the one word that runs through everything in this report actually is delivery, because we have successful delivery year on year, delivering projects at pace. I well remember when I became leader in 2015, I said that my watchword would be pace, and we have used that relentlessly throughout the last 8 years, and indeed before, under Councillor Chambers' leadership. We focused on delivery, we focused on pace, and we focused on good quality outcomes, and all of those we are still achieving today. and long may it be so. And I think that sometimes there is good, strong evidence of the input of member decision-making into the things that we're doing. I think it's a great example is buying Debenhams at the right time for the right price, and that was a member initiative. I well remember Councillor Golvin referenced the 20 affordable units at White Road. I well remember in the early days of exploring that site, the strong advice that I received was the site could not be developed because of its difficulty of access. I took a different view, and we can see today that not only could it be developed, it has been developed and provided 20 very good, high-quality, affordable homes for people that needed them. So another tick in the box for us. So yes, we do have to be very conscious of risk, and we do that. But I like to think that we take a pragmatic approach to spending, not least the capital programme, a pragmatic approach that leads us to deliver the projects that will help improve Medway and deliver them in the right way at the right price and deliver them as quickly as is possible under the constraints that we have. So a good document, and one that we'll rehearse more at the February meeting, and perhaps we will make more comments along the lines that Councillor Golvin made today at that meeting, because that is a perfect opportunity to do that. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Then move to agenda item 8, which is Councillor Doe, please.
Thank you, Leader. Well, this item deals with the proposal to purchase temporary accommodation. And by temporary accommodation, of course, I mean that when people come to us for housing, there may be a variety of reasons why that we need to look into it very closely. In fact, sometimes it's easy to do, but sometimes you need to take quite a long time to do it, and there needs to be some discussion. We keep that to the minimum. But the fact is that the market itself is a very hard one, because as, for example, when people are not buying, they're renting. And what is happening is that the supply of rented accommodation in this particular field, you know, for, as it were, almost casual occupation, you can't go along to the landlord and say, have you got anything we can put X or Y in, doesn't respond really to the fact that we need accommodation not in 24 hours' time, we need it now. And I think that's an important point. The other point is that one has to look at it and say, well, if you just looked at it as would we be better off renting at this precise moment in time or buying, you would say, well, let's just carry on renting. But what that does ignore is the fact that, first of all, when you pay rent on the property, that property is of no benefit. Any of the money that goes into it is of no benefit to the council whatsoever. If you do it, if you actually have your own property, then you always have the option of actually selling it on the market again should demand ever go down, really down. And we're not proposing that every unit of temporary accommodation should be bought by us, but what we're saying is we need to have enough really to try this concept out properly, to see if what we are projecting appears to be working, and if it is, then it's very good value for the general rate fund, rather than, you know, continuing to shop in a declining market, because as the market declines, it's all a question of the interaction of supply and demand, and as supply becomes less, then of course the prices go high, and also it becomes extremely difficult to house those people in the short term. So it is very important that we do have this accommodation. It has also a number of benefits, because obviously people don't save the best accommodation to let on a nightly basis in many ways. We always make sure that it's reasonable accommodation. Here we have control of the actual accommodation, so we know that this will be a reasonable accommodation that comes up to the right standards that the government and others, and indeed that the recipients of the service have a right to expect. And so therefore, what I'm suggesting is we take the recommendations in 10, and summed up really it is that we establish a pilot programme to purchase approximately 22 bedroomed properties at a cost of £5,590,000, that we recommend full council to add that to the capital programme funded by prudential borrowing to facilitate this pilot programme. And then it asks that the Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Place and Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with myself to authorise the purchase of properties of the pilot set out in 10.1 above. So I think really what we're asking here is to try out the system. I think that it will prove itself. In fact, I don't have any doubt about it, because when have you seen properties go down in the long term? They can go down in the short term, but they will always go up in the long term. So even if you find at the end of the day that those properties are not required, which I think is very unlikely, because actually at the moment we are talking about some 300 people in temporary accommodation, and it's going up. I think that this I think will then be proved, and those sums which have really been worked out you'll see in detail, but they are in fact not quite as what should I say, as statistically accurate as one can say, because you're dealing with something which you don't know, for example, what the rent would be in a particular year and so on. You're only making forecasts. But the fact of the matter is, it certainly seems to me it's worth a try. And if we don't try it, then we could seriously be in a position that some councils have found themselves in, where we have to push people outside the borough because we haven't got any temporary accommodation. Or we put them up in hotels, which actually then has the wrong connotation to it, because it seems quite unreasonable that that should happen. And also, it's extremely expensive. So that, for those reasons, I ask you to accept the recommendations in 10 and allow us to prove to you that this pilot will work.
Thank you. Councillor Doe. Councillor Filmer, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Very happy to support this pilot. I think looking forward is the way to go to secure accommodation. The only thing I would look reading through, and I should have mentioned this yesterday really, we're looking at 2-bedroom units. I wonder if we should keep ourselves more flexible regarding the market. You get a change in clients or needs, and the different properties that come on the market, it could well be worth the fact, instead of stating that we want 22-bedroom units, we leave that more open to see what comes on the market and see what the needs are for the temporary accommodation that we need. I don't know if that's something we could do, but more than happy to support it. And I'd just like to say, I'd like to thank the people in Medway for supporting the dustmen yesterday when they were having their snowball fight. The feedback on that has been very good. Dustmen have done a cracking job. Thank you very much to them. And thank you to the residents for seeing the funny side of it. There was a couple, you know, but hey-ho, they pick up the rubbish, they don't talk the rubbish. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, and I'd like to endorse Councillor Filmer's plug for the refuse men. Terribly difficult job over the last few days, and I think they've been absolutely brilliant. But back to this, I've got to say, Leader, I'm a little bit intrigued by the mention of pilot all the way through this report, because I'd like to remind colleagues we've actually dipped our toes in this particular pool about 6 or 7 years ago. We purchased 9 properties at that time, which were then used for temporary accommodation, still are. But that was done as a property investment, and we actually made a return on that investment to the benefit of the general fund. So since we purchased those 9 properties, we've also added slightly to that stock. There's a pair of semis in the brook that were left over from the improvement schemes there, and we've also added 2 further properties in Queen Street, which were purchased for regeneration purposes. They are also being used for temporary accommodation. So we have already got a precedent that we've purchased properties, and I think there are some really good benefits, as Councillor Doe said. The benefits are to the general fund, because that's where the accommodation is funded for. It's not out of the HRA, it's funded out of the General Fund. And also, he's absolutely right. We'll be in a position to provide better quality homes because we will be able to pick and choose a bit of what properties we take. And we certainly, remembering back to when we purchased the initial 9 properties, we took particular care to get properties that were in good condition, that was fit for purpose. So just because people haven't got a proper home yet doesn't mean to say that they should have to put up with some substandard facilities. And we bought 9 really good properties, and the ones we've added to have all been good ones as well. And Councillor Lowe is absolutely right that the value of these will go up in the longer term, and I think we can consider this as another property development. So wearing my property hat, I'm absolutely delighted that we should do this.
Thank you. Councillor Hackwell, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, more than happy to support this approach. I think that Councillor Doe alluded to it, that if we were to buy temporary accommodation for all the temporary accommodation we need, we'd probably need 10 or 15 times the amount of these properties to buy to service our residents. I think I've taken on Councillor Filmer's point about the 2-bedroom. I'm sure the officers have chosen 2-bedroom because they're the hardest accommodation to rent in the private sector. But I think we need to leave it up to the officers to decide what best way to do it. And I think doing it in a small 20 off to see how it goes. I appreciate what Councillor Galvin says, that we have got a few around that we've had for a long time, but this is the way to go. And as you say, Councillor Doe, properties over the long term only increase in value. So I think it's a win-win situation for both the housing team and for the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Doe, please.
Well, can I thank Councillors Filmer, Galvin and Hackwell for their support of this. I think it is something, you say we have had the benefit of it before, but not quite in this way. And as far as I'm concerned, we really wanted, the reason why we mentioned 2-bedroom properties there was actually on the cost line. That basically you're multiplying, it's a very crude calculation, isn't it? Because you're having to buy them. But if we started mixing in 1-bedrooms and 3-bedrooms, you can't with any figure you like. What we're saying is we'll put this 5.5 billion into this programme properly. It will probably be more 2-bedroom properties because there's an odd anomaly. When it comes to market properties, at this precise moment in time, you can't get enough single 1-bedroom properties. But on the other hand, 2-bedrooms are harder. You've still a market for it, but it's harder. We found that out with Garrison Point, and it's been need to be marketed harder to achieve that. And therefore, I think when you talk about buying, 2-bedroom houses, it isn't often single people that are wanting those because obviously some of them are not even qualified, for us to house. So I think that it's quite a difference in market between what is buying and selling and what is actual renting. So we will reflect the pressures here. There will be enough, for example, 2-bedroom properties. This will only touch some of it. Good Lord, we're dealing with some 300 people, so we don't have any difficulty in filling 2-bedroom properties. But if demand was suddenly to change or price suddenly change, then we would have to review it. That's why we're keeping it under review for each purchase. If it's not a good purchase, we ain't going to do it. So it's as simple as that. Okay? So I therefore urge you to accept the recommendations in section 10. And I do thank my colleagues for their support.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Okay, agenda item number 9, Councillor Isles and Councillor Potter, whichever order you choose.
Yep, thank you, Leader. So this is the report on the consultation on the 2024 school admission schemes and arrangements. The report outlines the outcomes of the schemes for both primary and secondary admissions in 2024 and the admissions arrangements for community and voluntary controlled schools. Each year the Council is required to publish the admission schemes and arrangements. Where there are significant changes from the previous year, consultation must take place. The schemes set out how the Council will coordinate the admissions processes for all schools and the entry arrangements, which is oversubscription criteria, and publish admissions numbers for community and voluntary controlled primary, infant and junior schools. The consultation ran from the 3rd of October 2022 to the 11th of November, in line with the requirements of the School Admissions Code 2021. In both the primary and secondary coordinated admission schemes, there are several changes. The main changes for the secondary admissions are the increase to the percentage of children assessed as grammar through the Medway test, which will go from 23% to 26% of the Medway cohort, subject to the changes to Chatham Grammar, Pitt Grammar and Holcombe Grammar being approved, with those schools going to co-educational if approved by the Regional Schools Commissioner. The extended writing test name is to be updated to writing test in keeping with the current and up-to-date assessments in schools. The mathematics test will be changed to the mathematics skills and non-verbal reasoning test, which includes the addition of a non-verbal reasoning assessment to the Medway test, and the verbal reasoning test name updated to verbal skills in keeping with the current up-to-date assessment. For primary admissions, the main change there is the reduction of the published admissions number for Parkwood Primary School and Crest Infant School from 90 to 60. There are also some changes around clarifying terminology and descriptions. As of the closing date of the consultation, 2 responses were received, which are set out in the report. By approving the recommendations in section 10 of the report, the Cabinet will be ensuring that the Council complies with the required processes in determining the admissions arrangements for 2024. So therefore I move that the Cabinet supports the recommendation as set out in section 10 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howes, please.
Yes, all I have to add to Councillor Potter's introduction is that we have actually, we have carried out the statutory requirement, and I would also like to thank officers and staff for all the hard work that they put into this annual task year on year with good success. Thank you.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 10. Please note that there's a supplementary agenda item number 1 which refers and slightly tweaks the recommendations. Councillor Potter. Nice flicking all off.
Somebody got their thing still on?
Hope it works again now. Yeah. Right, okay. We're back in business. In April 2018, the school's national funding formula was introduced, which calculates the school's block dedicated grant, which is awarded to local authorities based on funding allocation for individual schools. Over the past years, local authorities have worked with the schools forum, and they can continue collectively to decide whether to go to a hard national funding formula or continue with a local funding formula which moves towards the national funding formula. The proposal before members is for a local funding formula which is moving towards the national funding formula. The government have set a minimum per pupil funding guarantee which a school or academy will receive, and this is £4,405 per pupil at primary school and at least £5,715 per pupil at a secondary school. The total funding available for schools and academies is provided through the dedicated schools grant, and this is funded through the methodology as set out in the Council's report. Officers consulted with schools and academies in November 2022, and at the meeting of the 7th of December, the Schools Forum recommended to Cabinet to set the provisional local funding formula based on moving to the national funding formula as set out in the report, meeting the government's minimum funding guarantee requirements. The Education and Skills Funding Agency requests that local authorities approve the final funding formula by the 20th of January 2023. Owing to the Schools Forum meeting being held on the 11th of January 2023, this is for the final funding formula, this matter cannot be brought to Cabinet until the 7th of February 2023. Therefore, as we do every year, the Council will submit the draft funding formula to the ESFA by the 20th of January, and then the final funding formula will come back in that February meeting. When that report is presented, there is a request to remove the call-in, so there's no further delay to that final funding formula going to the ESFA. So I would like to thank officers for and the Schools Forum for their work in producing the funding formula for next year. And I move the recommendations, which will be the recommendations set out in section 2 of the addendum report.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Isles.
No further comment on this, except to thank officers as well, and and to say that we have carried out our statutory duty.
Yes, this is a very technical report.
Really technical.
Is that agreed? Is that agreed?
Put on to Les Wicks.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it. Agenda item 11. I think Councillor Golvin, you're taking this on behalf of Councillor Chitty, who's not with us today.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I've drawn the short straw. Leader, this report presents two highly technical documents prepared by the Planning Service to meet the government's requirements for publishing data on development and infrastructure. These are the Annual Authority Monitoring Report and the Annual Infrastructure Funding Statement. The Authority Monitoring Report brings together substantial information about the area for the last financial year. This includes statistics and indicators on Medway's population and development trends and social, economic and environmental aspects of the local area. It also provides an update on the planning policy work. A key measure reported in the AMR is the annual rate of house building in Medway. 1,102 new homes were built in Medway in 21-22, which is a continuation of the high rates of house building seen in Medway over the last 3 years. This was the second highest rate of house building recorded last year across all authorities in the CELEP area. However, the rate is still far short of the government's defined level of local housing needs of 1,675 homes a year. The pipeline of sites with planning permission provides for just under 8,000 homes, and individual sites are detailed in Volume 2 of the AMR. This pipeline contributes to Medway's development needs over the period of the new local plan. Rates of population growth continues the trend of relatively low growth seen in Medway over the last 5 years. In the economic measures, there was an increase in new employment floor space and an uplift in economic activity rate, that is, people in employment or seeking employment, in contrast to wider trends of declines across the country. However, development of retail and town centre uses continue to reflect the wider structural changes and challenges. The infrastructure funding statement sets out the details of funding agreed, received and spent through developer contributions and proposed spend on infrastructure. The IFS is intended to provide clarity on how developer contributions have been and will be used to increase the capacity of services and infrastructure. The total amount of money from planning obligations spent during the reported year was £2,665,943. Quite a significant sum, Leader, I would say. 106 funding was used to develop a range of services in Medway to address impacts of growth. These include delivery of affordable housing, investment in schools, transport, waste services, parks, play areas and community facilities. Further details of the funding agreed and received through developer contributions is set out in the IFS at Appendix 2 of the report. It's important to note that data on developer contributions is not definitive. The report represents estimates at any one given time and can be subject to change. For example, development may not come forward as originally planned or agreements may be revised. The figures in the IFS represent the most robust data currently available. So, Leader, I would like to move the recommendations 10.1 and 10.2 on page 238 of the agenda, namely that Cabinet is asked to approve the Medway Authority Monitoring Report 2022 as set out in Appendix 1 to the report, and Cabinet is also asked to approve the publication of the Infrastructure Funding Statement 2022 as set out as Appendix 2 of the report. So moved, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. Councillor Chambers?
I will support those recommendations, but I want to make one or two comments. As Councillor Golding says, that we are required under the Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 to produce an authority monitoring report, and we are also required to produce an infrastructure funding statement. And this is something that we've been doing for the last 18 years. Where it says that in the report the local plan is the statutory development plan for the area and is part of the council's policy, and therefore the monitoring report and infrastructure statements are supportive of the local development scheme, i.e. the local plan, I'd like to emphasise that as we at the present do not have an up-to-date local plan, the local plan referred to here is in fact the 2003 local plan, and that will continue until we get a new local plan, whenever that may be. What I want to do is commend the substance in the report to colleagues. One is the executive summary prior to the report, which I think spells out the extent and also is very informative on what the situation at present is across the number of areas. I would also like to commend to colleagues the introduction to the report, which I think spells out what I've said about the reasons that we have to produce these two reports, or the statement and the report. But I want to go further, and this actually carries on from some of the comments that were made on the capital strategy, just to bring to members' attention the vast wealth of information that is in the report on delivering development, and then we go on to regeneration and the extent of the regeneration, and a report, small reports on the regeneration sites updates, which I commend to colleagues in the report, because it gives you just the extent of the regeneration that is being undertaken here in Medway, and was planned quite a time ago when we started the regeneration programme in some substance around about 2002, 2003, when we received considerable government support to enable us to do that. But I'd just like to go through the, and on page 22, 23, 24 of the report, 25 of the report, and it goes on with information about and the extent of the regeneration that we have undertaken as a local authority in conjunction, in most instances, in partnership with the private sector, some by the private sector alone, and some by others that are not in partnership with the council. And the extent of what has been achieved is laid out on those pages, and what is intended. And I think it makes very positive reading as far as Medway is concerned, in its determination to, as you've said, my watchword when leader was always delivery, and you took over from me and you added the word pace to that, and that is the way we are going, and we're moving on. And those people who say nothing is happening in Medway, they should read this report to see the extent. So it gives me great pleasure in supporting the recommendations that Councillor Galvin has moved.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Leader. And as my colleagues have said, this report should be read. It's very, very interesting, and it's just like the Capital report. It's got a wealth of information, and I urge people, if they read two reports, just to read these two reports. They tell everybody what's going on in Medway. Some of the things that I picked up from the report is the small increase in population that Medway has had over the last year, only 650 people, which was down from over 3,000 people 10 years ago, even though we've been building houses at over 1,000 houses, or dwellings, I should say, over the last year, and nearly 3,000 over the last 3 years. Interesting to know that the migration into Medway, I think it says 12,100 people moved out of Medway, and only 11,600 moved in. So there is a net migration. So I do wonder where all these houses are going, really, because the population's getting smaller. I think one of the things I also picked out from the report was the strategy to develop on pre-used land, and we've nearly 53% of all residential completions are on previously developed land. So, we are trying to save our green spaces and build on brownfield sites. And talking about brownfield sites, the list published in December last year consisted of 60 sites with a capacity of over 2,000 homes, and 33 of these have had planning permission already, and just for 900 dwellings, so we're getting there. It also mentions in there the grants that Councillor Chambers mentioned, and it lists out nearly 40 million grants that we've had to regenerate Chatham Town Centre and create the Innovation Park Medway, which has had a knock-on effect and where employment is on the rise in Medway. There's many more interesting facts in the report, from the activities in the port to the Green Flag Awards, air quality, obesity in children and adults, education provision expansion, transport flows, bus journeys and the amount of and trains, and also the amount of pubs that we've lost over the last few years in Medway. So I think it's well worth a read, and I would recommend everybody to read this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just a couple of comments from me, please. Firstly, the executive summary. I really like this. For a report like this, I really like this infographic approach, and I think it's really punchy. It's got all the key stats there that anyone needs to know at a glance, and so I commend that for future reports. I think it's really powerful. The second point I want to make is about duty to cooperate, starting on page 14 to pages 16. And I think it's worth saying what we in this Cabinet certainly all know, that a duty to cooperate may be a government requirement, it is not a duty to agree. And I think the most recent example of that is our vehement disagreement with Maidstone Borough Council about its proposals to basically dump its housing allocation on the southern boundary of Medway, and we've resisted that. We'll continue to resist it, as it's a completely inappropriate proposal in a completely inappropriate rural area without any good access and without any facilities. In fact, the prospectus for that proposal demonstrates that it is a Medway development on Maidstone, within the Maidstone boundary, because all the facilities and services that it points towards are all Medway facilities. So it's a shameful proposal, and we'll continue to we'll continue to resist it, as I said. The other thing I want to draw attention to, excuse me, is Councillor Hackwell's comments about population. Now, I think one of the things that irritates this administration and all of my colleagues, as far as I'm aware, is the government-imposed housing targets of some 28,000, which are based on the 2014 population projections, not on the most recent one, which is 2017, I believe I'm right in saying, which demonstrates that instead of 28,000 houses over the local plan period, we need 17,000. And surprise, surprise, the government has picked the number that suits them most, and that is why Medway has an excessively high housing target imposed on it by central government. Now there's talk as the levelling up bill progresses through Parliament, there is now talk that the government will make changes to the National Planning Policy Framework and ameliorate those numbers, but there's some very weasel wording around that doesn't give me much confidence that that will actually happen. What the government needs to come out with and quite clearly say, in Medway's case, is that we will use the latest population statistics, and the housing numbers will be driven from that population census, population projections rather, and that will be used as the basis for growing Medway, and leave the local authority to do that. But of course, all governments of all persuasion cannot help but tinker. So let's be interested to see whether those Conservative MPs that are lobbying to make significant changes to that white paper, whether those proposals that are being mooted by the Secretary of State come to pass, and how much wriggle room there will be within those proposals. And I expect, and I hope I'm wrong, be substantial wriggle room, and I suspect, again, I hope I'm wrong, that actually we won't see much difference once the white paper becomes an act of Parliament. But I've been wrong in the past, once, about 35 years ago, I think it was. So we'll have to wait and see whether I'm right or wrong. Back to you, Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, colleagues. I'd like to thank Councillor Chambers for his detailed insights into reports, which were very useful, and also to point out on the points that you made, Leader, and Councillor Hackwell made about net migration and housing numbers, because, and the point you made is absolutely right, Leader, that it should be left to Medway to determine what our housing demand is. And I think this report shows what I'm finding out, that the majority of the houses that we are building in Medway are going to local people. One of the jobs that Councillor Doe delegated to me as a director of MDC was to sign off all the sales contracts. Some, 70-odd sales ones, followed by now a fair number of exchanges. And it's been interesting to look at the addresses of the people who are purchasing our properties at Garrison Point, and the vast majority have come from Medway, I'm pleased to say. So that, I think, dispels the urban myth that goes around that all new development in Medway is just filled up with people from London. It's not true. You know, we are providing homes for local people, and that is what we should be doing. And we need to carry on doing that for our local demand, not to try and boost the numbers for the rest of the total builds for the whole country. You know, this has got to be Medway focused, and I think this very good report does give us all that information, which is very much welcome. So thanks, colleagues, and just to reiterate the bits I moved in the first place. So,
is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We've got agenda item 12, which is Councillor Brake, please.
Thank you, Leader. This paper concerns the Gateway 3 contract award, Medway Adult Substance Treatment, Harm Reduction and Recovery Service. Now, by way of background, the Health and Social Care Act of 2012 transferred responsibility for the commissioning of drug and alcohol treatment services to upper-tier local authorities in 2013. Since that time, Medway Council has overseen the commissioning and delivery of drug and alcohol treatment services across Medway. The current contract has now come to an end. And whilst our providers have delivered consistent performance, generally well above the England average, we are now obliged to re-tender the service at the end of the contract period. In line with the ambitions set out in the new National 10-Year Drug Strategy, From Harm to Hope, which was published in 2021, we have undertaken a high competitive and quality-focused procurement process and have been successful in obtaining enhanced and more efficient provision for our residents, and the key benefits of our new service include superior premises location and design, superior contingency plans for reduced resources, and that includes private fundraising to mitigate any reduction in funding, strong evidence of using people with lived experience to co-design premises and services throughout, offer of 32 free residential rehabilitation places at forward trusts owned centres. One place averages between £5,000 and £10,000. Significant innovative practice, including use of data and technology to support people who generally do not engage with treatment services, which drives up competitive rates. A strong focus on support networks and robust harms reduction offer. Excellent offer of enhanced support for families and people transitioning between services, particularly those with complex needs. And finally, significantly lower bid price. This new service will enable Medway residents in need to access specialist drug, in need to access specialist drug and alcohol treatment and support to receive excellent care. It is recommended Cabinet agree the recommendations as set out at 9.1 to award the Medway Substance Abuse Treatment Harm Reduction and Recovery Service to the provider named at 3.2 of the exempt appendix. Thank you, Leader. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Brake. Councillor Golding, please.
I'd very much like to support Councillor Brake with this. Wearing my Community Safety Partnership Chair hat, one of the biggest challenges we've got here in Medway is drug dealing, county lines and criminal gang activities. All of those are driven by people's drug addictions, and if we're going to make any inroads into that criminality, we've got to reduce the demand. The police put huge efforts into combating drug activity, but until we actually reduce that demand, it's not going to get us anywhere. I'm very pleased that Councillor Brake has joined us on the Combating Drugs Partnership. That's the CSP is taking a leading role, and this is on the back of the work that Lady Black did, which led to the government report that Councillor Brake mentioned, From Harm to Hope. So there's a lot of work, interagency work going on with this now. So it's not just the medical side, which is good, because when people are actually drug addicts, that is then a public health issue. It's not a moral failing. Drug addiction is a health issue, and it's got to be treated as such. However, before we get to that stage, there's a lot of recreational drug use that needs to be dealt with as well. Interestingly, Leader, like yourself, I also wrote an email to the captain of HMS Medway to congratulate them on their fantastic drugs bust in the Caribbean, which was a fantastic piece of work. I think it would be very interesting when HMS Medway comes back to Medway, if we could do some work with them, because it would be very interesting to have a presentation from them on their activity in the Caribbean and Central America, because this trail of criminality that is enhanced by people's recreational drug use stretches from Medway right across to the Caribbean and Central America. It's not just our issue, it's a worldwide issue, and I think it would be really good to get together with our colleagues from HMS Medway when they come eventually, hopefully come back to visit us again soon here in Medway, because that brings home what a wide-ranging situation this is. So, but back locally, I think the provider that's named in the report does a huge amount of really good work already in Medway, and I look forward to working with them in the future and Councillor Brake to make sure that we have a twin prong approach with this. That yes, we will deal with the criminality, but we will also deal with the health issues as well. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I fully support this procurement because, as in the same or similar way to what Councillor Goldwyn has said, drug taking, alcohol abuse has terrible consequences and ongoing consequences for children, the safeguarding of children and their well-being within the family unit, which often results in them having to call on the statutory services, being children in need or worse, child protection, and eventually coming into care. So anything and everything that can be done in terms of treatment for drug addiction and alcohol abuse is most welcome by me. In fact, it's imperative for the sake of our children. Thank you.
Councillor Doe.
I'd just like to make one thing clear. I think the efforts of the Blue Light Committee and those sort of and the police in tackling drugs is great, and of course Medway isn't free of it. But I do want to emphasise this does need, and I'm sure Councillor Gold would agree with me, it does need to be set in proportion, because I think Medway is still a great place to live. It can't be entirely insulated from the rest of the world, but frankly, you have far less chance of experiencing problems in Medway than in numbers of cities up and down the country. So I think that we are combating this fairly, I think, successfully. However, there's always more to be done. But I think that the efforts that Councillor Goldwyn and his team make with the police, I think, are really commendable.
Back to you, Councillor Brake, I think. Everyone done? Yep, that was a break.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, colleagues, for your input and your comments. I think that as has been outlined by my colleagues, that this is in fact a very important issue that needs to be addressed, and I fully support what Councillor Doe has said with regard to living in Medway. It is one of the best places to live and to grow up and to work, and it is important that we maintain that high level of quality within our lives across Medway. And whilst Councillors Goldwyn and Isles and Doe have been actively involved in what goes on within this particular area, I think the other area that we do need to highlight, and it's in the body of the report, and that is we shouldn't forget the fact that the public health team have built up very good relationships with the environmental services and the Commissioner of Medway Council's waste contracts, and information on hotspots around the towns is given, together with reports of drugs, litter, and shared issues are in fact shared with the teams and fed back to make sure that we can incorporate this information and the location on the various visits. So, as well as keeping our people clean and free of drugs, but equally we are looking to make sure that those that do get involved with drugs and the needles, syringes and everything else, etc., is another important issue that is being looked after. So thank you, Councillor Filmer, for your team and the work that they do in this as well. So thank you very much. I move the recommendations as outlined at 9.1. Leader.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Final item, agenda item 13, and there is a supplementary agenda item number 2, which is on the blue pages and therefore exempt for discussion in public. Councillor Isles, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to present this report to Cabinet this afternoon. The report outlines the terms and details of the procurement process of supported accommodation and floating support for our children in need of this service. The Council has adopted the Dynamic Purchasing System, DPS, approach to procurement covering 6 lots, which are semi-independent accommodation, managed accommodation, floating support, standard and enhanced, therapeutic support for parents, young people and families, activity placements and individual tuition service. The current procurement has received 75 tenders with a total lots 1, 2 and 3 receiving a high level of successful bids. Lots 4, 5 and 6 received a much lower response. Further to the detail and by way of explanation, the DPS approach allows more flexibility and opportunity to engage with the market. For example, commissioning is already working proactively with a number of providers to address the shortfalls in tenders for those lots 4, 5 and 6. There are already 16 tenders waiting for evaluation on the business portal, which under a traditional fixed framework would not have been able to bid. The quality of successful bids has been generally good, with some outstanding. We have received bids from a wide range of providers, including some that we have not worked with previously. It should be noted that in lots 1 and 2, which is a supported accommodation, the majority of spot providers we currently use have tendered and passed evaluation. Providers tender under a mini-competition basis, which takes place every time Medway seeks to procure a service via the DPS framework. As stated in the tender documents, there is a 60% cost and 40% quality split, but final decisions remains with social care colleagues and is based on the needs of the child, family, etc. The decision to admit a provider to the DPS is based on an assessment of the information provided on a questionnaire form. The questionnaire asks for details on hourly rates and accommodation costs and how they are calculated, giving the authority an opportunity to develop a better understanding of the market, as well as identifying providers with excessive overheads or profits. Providers can join the DPS at any time, allowing more flexibility within the system and thereby negating costly spot purchasing and potentially unregulated and unregistered placements. In regards to Ofsted, they have held briefings relating to the new regulation of the supported accommodation market. At this stage, the approach they appear to be adopting complements Medway's approach to the supported accommodation market. I should like Cabinet to note for the report that following further pre-modification of tenders, there has been a slight change to Section 3.2 of the Gateway 3 report, with 3 providers now deemed not to have been successful. So I therefore move to the recommendation on the addendum exempt appendix onto the dynamic purchasing system for the lots they have successfully tendered for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. We've had a number of items today where we've talked about our ambitions for Medway, or indeed how we are delivering an ambitious programme for Medway, whether that's monumental regeneration, whether that's the work we're doing with regard to SEND, and just what we're providing in terms of investing in provision for the people of Medway and the future of Medway. But it's important we are ambitious for all people in Medway, and in particular that we have the right provision in place to support those who require that support from the council. And with this particular cohort here, they are at a very critically important transition in their life, and it is really, we really have to ensure we do have that right provision in place. So I welcome the changes that are coming through with this report, with the difference between the existing framework and what we're able to do with these changes.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Galvin.
Just briefly for me, I'd like to go a little bit more on the technical side of this, because this is providing a much improved service, but I think what this demonstrated by the use of the dynamic purchasing system was very good cooperation between the procurement teams, category management and the commissioning teams. They worked very hard to develop this process, and there was a lot of pre-engagement with potential suppliers as well. So this was almost a good example of how we should be procuring these sort of services by trying to expand the amount of people coming of the market that's available, working with them and coming up with a good result that's going to, I hope, and I do believe will make a significant contribution to better quality provision for our young people who desperately need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Isles?
Just to say that Councillor Galvin is absolutely right. There has been an enormous amount of diligence put into this by all parties that he's mentioned. It is imperative that we get this right. We will see that as that goes along, but we have to get a grip on the market because obviously the rising costs of placements is just unacceptable. But moreover, we need to have the right provision in place. Thank you.
Is that agreed? That brings us to the end of the final Cabinet meeting of the calendar year. So I'd just like to wish officers, Cabinet and our growing army of viewers the best wishes for Christmas and New Year, and we'll see you all in January. Thank you, everyone.